Ryan's office revenge. I got fired 14 minutes after I walked through the door. Not 14 days, not 14 hours. 14 minutes. And the woman sitting across from me didn't even know how to spell my name. My name is George Sullivan. I'm 51 years old, and I've been working in procurement operations for 25 years. Before that, I spent 8 years in the Army doing logistics. Point is, I know how systems work, and I know when they're broken on purpose. I'd arrived early that Tuesday morning because that's what you do when you're starting fresh. New company, better title, decent bump in pay. I'd pressed my shirt the night before and polished my shoes like I was reporting for duty. The building looked like money. All glass and steel with a lobby that smelled expensive. They had their company values etched in brushed metal on the wall. Integrity, innovation, excellence. I should have paid more attention to which one was missing. The receptionist checked my ID and frowned. Just for a second, but I caught it. 25 years of reading people's faces in corporate hallways teaches you things. One moment, she said, still smiling but typing fast. I figured it was the usual first-day glitches. Systems are always slow to catch up. She handed me a temporary visitor badge. Someone will be right with you. So I stood there with my portfolio and my optimism, watching people flow through the lobby with their coffee and their confidence. I tried to picture myself among them by next month. My start date was locked in, my orientation scheduled for 9 a.m. with HR, then team introductions. Everything clean and organized, just like I'd learned to appreciate in the Army. Then a side door opened, and a woman stepped out like she was late for something important. HR badge on a lanyard, clipboard in her hand. That particular kind of tired that comes from delivering bad news for a living. She glanced at the receptionist, then at me. Are you... She looked down at her clipboard. The new hire? Yes, ma'am. George Sullivan. I stepped forward, ready to shake hands like my father taught me. I'm Patricia Henderson, Human Resources. Come with me, please. No handshake, no welcome, just turn and walk. I followed her past the elevators, past rows of cubicles where a few heads turned to watch us pass. Something in their eyes made my stomach tighten. Not curiosity, recognition. Like they'd seen this parade before and knew where it was heading. She led me to a small conference room with frosted glass walls. No windows, one chair on each side of a table, and an envelope sitting dead center like it had been measured and placed with a ruler. The door clicked shut with a sound that reminded me of a prison cell. Please have a seat, Patricia said, settling across from me with the efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times. Can you confirm your full legal name for me? I spelled it out slowly, clearly, the way you do when someone's taking down information that matters. She typed, slowly, carefully, like she was double-checking something that should have been simple. That's when I should have known something was wrong. When you've worked somewhere long enough to fire people, you already know their names. Mr. Sullivan, she said, sliding the envelope toward me like she was dealing cards. I need to be direct. This position is being eliminated effective immediately. The words hit me like static on a radio. For a moment, my brain couldn't process them. They didn't make sense in the context of sitting in a building where I was supposed to work for the next several years. Eliminated? I just got here. I haven't even... I understand this is unexpected. There was an internal restructuring that affects the business need for this role. My mouth went dry. 25 years of corporate experience and 8 years of military service, and I'd never been fired from anything. Did I do something wrong? No, this is not performance-related, she said quickly, like that should make me feel better. But it didn't make me feel better. It made me feel like a piece of equipment being moved around by people who didn't know what it was for. I signed an offer letter, I said, keeping my voice level the way the Army taught me when dealing with officers who were making bad decisions. I resigned from my last position. I turned down other opportunities. Patricia nodded once. Just acknowledgement, no sympathy. The company will provide severance as outlined in the enclosed agreement. I opened the envelope with steady hands, even though my insides felt like I was back in basic training getting dressed down by a drill sergeant. Termination letter dated today. Release agreement with signature lines and legal language. And then I saw something that made my jaw clench like I was biting down on a bullet. My name was spelled wrong. Not a typo. Wrong enough that it looked like they'd never actually seen it written down before. Like I was just a placeholder in their system, a generic new hire that could be swapped out for anyone. "You don't even know who I am," I said quietly, and I could hear the edge in my voice that used to make junior enlisted soldiers stand up straighter. Patricia's eyes flicked down to the paper like she was seeing it for the first time. "I apologize. Can you confirm the correct spelling?" I corrected it. She fixed it like she was updating a shipping manifest, mechanical and impersonal. Then she said the thing that really got under my skin. "We'll need your badge back before you leave." I looked down at the temporary visitor badge clipped to my shirt. 25 years of building a reputation in procurement. 8 years of serving my country, and they wanted their visitor sticker back like I was returning borrowed equipment. "Who made this decision?" I asked, and my voice carried the kind of authority I'd learned from years of dealing with supply chain problems that nobody wanted to take responsibility for. "I can't discuss internal decision-making. Can I speak to my hiring manager?" "Michael Brooks?" She hesitated just long enough to tell me everything I needed to know. In the Army, when someone hesitates before answering a direct question, it means they're calculating how much truth they can afford to tell you. "Mr. Brooks is unavailable." Through the frosted glass behind her, I saw a shadow pause outside the room. Someone had been standing there, listening to my termination like it was a performance they needed to monitor. The shadow moved away when they realized I'd noticed, but not before I got a good look at the outline. Tall, broad shoulders. Definitely male. Someone important enough to want to oversee my removal personally. Patricia didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on me, waiting for me to be a good soldier and follow orders without asking uncomfortable questions. That's when something shifted in my head, the same way it used to when I was looking at a logistics problem that didn't add up. The numbers were wrong, the timing was off, and someone was trying to rush me past the parts that would expose their mistake. This wasn't a mistake. Mistakes come with apologies and confusion, and people scrambling to fix things. This was prepared. A pre-printed envelope, a scripted conversation, a manager who happened to be unavailable at the exact moment I needed to talk to him, and someone important enough to personally monitor my termination. I set the papers down carefully, the way I used to set down sensitive equipment that might explode if handled wrong. "If the position is eliminated, why did you hire me in the first place?" Patricia held my gaze for a beat too long, and I could see her running through her approved responses like she was checking a manual. I can only speak to what I was instructed to do today. And that was when I knew I wasn't being fired, because I'd failed. I was being fired because someone wanted me gone before I could ask the right questions. Before I could see something they didn't want me to see. I stood up, gathered the papers, and shook her hand like a professional. But I promised myself something sitting in that windowless room. I wasn't going to disappear quietly. Because if they could do this to me in 14 minutes, they'd done it before to other people who probably didn't have 25 years of corporate experience and 8 years of military training to fight back with. Outside, the air felt sharp and too bright, like stepping out of a bunker into daylight. I sat in my truck for a long time, staring at the building through the windshield, watching people move around inside like nothing had happened. like I hadn't just been erased before my first cup of coffee. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Do not contact anyone at the company. You will be paid according to the agreement. It wasn't written like HR correspondence. It was written like a direct order, the kind that doesn't expect questions or discussion. But I'd been taking orders for 33 years, and I'd learned to tell the difference between legitimate authority and someone trying to bluff their way past proper procedure. I didn't reply. I just took a screenshot and saved it in a folder I called Day 1. Because if there's one thing 25 years in corporate and 8 years in the Army teaches you, it's this. When someone tells you to shut up without explaining why, it usually means they're afraid of what you might say if you start talking to the right people. I opened my offer letter again, looking for the part that explained how a job could disappear faster than it takes to complete a security badge application. The hiring manager was listed as Michael Brooks, Operations Director. But the signature wasn't his. It was someone called Michelle Parker. Interim VP Operations. Interim. That word carries a lot of weight when you know how to read corporate politics. It means someone's holding a position temporarily while other people fight over who gets to keep it permanently. It means decisions get made fast because everyone's trying to secure their position before the music stops. I found Michael Brooks' email in the recruiting thread and sent a simple message. I was terminated on my start date before completing orientation. Can we discuss what happened? 3 seconds later, delivery failure. Invalid address. I stared at that bounce-back message until it started making sense in a way that made my chest tighten. Invalid address meant either Michael Brooks didn't exist or someone had already scrubbed him from the system. And you don't scrub someone from the system unless you're trying to eliminate evidence. I went back through the entire email chain from recruiting, reading it like an after-action report. The coordinator who'd scheduled everything so efficiently was named Amanda Foster. Professional, responsive, always seemed to know exactly what information I needed and when I needed it. I searched the company directory through their public website. Her profile didn't load. Error page, just like Michael Brooks. My phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. You need to sign today. No please, no name, no explanation. Just pressure, the kind that comes from someone who's used to being obeyed without question. But I wasn't some junior enlisted soldier anymore. I was a 51-year-old man with enough experience to know the difference between legitimate urgency and manufactured panic. I called the recruiting agency that had connected me with this position. The recruiter, Jessica Taylor, answered with the kind of cheerful professionalism that dies quickly when reality hits. "George, how did your first day go?" I gave her the timeline straight, no emotion, just facts. The same way I used to brief officers who needed to understand a situation quickly and completely. Her voice changed. "But they confirmed your start." Michael's team confirmed everything just yesterday. "Did you ever actually speak to Michael?" I asked. Long pause. The kind of pause that happens when someone realizes they've been part of something without knowing what it was. No, he was always in meetings. It was mostly his coordinator, Amanda. "Amanda Foster?" "Yes, that's her. She handled all the logistics. I asked her to forward me every document she had. Requisition, approval chain, offer routing, authorization signatures, everything that would show me who really made the decision to hire me and who made the decision to fire me. She promised she would, and I could hear in her voice that she was starting to understand this wasn't just an unfortunate misunderstanding. This was something that had been planned, executed, and covered up with the kind of precision you only see when someone's done it before. After I hung up with Jessica, I sat in my truck for another 20 minutes. doing what any good logistics officer does when the situation goes sideways. I made a list. Not theories, not feelings, facts. I arrived for work at 8:45 a.m. I was terminated at 8:59 a.m. HR didn't know my name. My manager's email bounced as invalid. My coordinator's profile was scrubbed from the system. Someone texted me to stay quiet. Someone was listening outside the termination meeting. When you line it up like that, it stops looking like bad luck and starts looking like a deliberate operation, the kind where someone planned every step and assigned roles to make sure nothing went wrong. I pulled up every email from the hiring process and started reading like I was conducting an intelligence briefing, because that's what this was now, gathering intelligence on an enemy that had already made the first move. The recruiting documents arrived within an hour. Jessica had forwarded everything: requisition forms, approval chains, offer routing, budget codes. I spread them across my kitchen table like battle plans and started connecting dots. The job requisition showed something interesting. The role was created under a temporary project code, not a permanent cost center. In my 25 years of corporate experience, temporary project codes are used for consultants and contractors, not permanent hires with benefits and stock options. The approval chain showed someone named Nicholas Coleman as the requester, not Michael Brooks. I looked up Nicholas Coleman on LinkedIn. Senior Director, Operations Transformation. Those transformation people always show up during reorganizations. They build PowerPoint presentations and move organizational charts around and call it strategy. But here's what really caught my attention. The requisition was created and approved in the same day. In my experience, legitimate hiring requisitions take weeks to move through approval chains. Someone had rushed this through the system like they were racing against a deadline. My phone buzzed. Same unknown number. Last chance. Sign today. It wasn't even 2 p.m. They were acting like there was a bomb under their desk with a timer counting down. That's when the picture finally came together, clear as a target in rifle sights. They hadn't hired me into a real job that got eliminated overnight. They'd hired me into a phantom position that was never properly authorized in the first place. When someone in finance or legal caught the discrepancy, they needed to clean up the paper trail before it became a line item in the wrong executive's budget review. I wasn't just collateral damage. I was evidence that needed to be destroyed before it could testify against someone. I called my friend Rebecca Turner, who works in compliance for a defense contractor. She's got the kind of mind that can read a contract and tell you where the landmines are buried. We'd served together briefly when I was transitioning out of the Army, and she'd helped me navigate corporate politics more than once. "George, what's wrong?" she said. She could hear it in my voice the way people can when they've known you long enough. "I need a second opinion on something. Can we meet?" We met at a coffee shop downtown, the kind of place where conversations disappear into ambient noise and no one pays attention to what's happening at other tables. I slid my laptop across and let her read through everything while I watched her face. "They're trying to close this before you figure out the right vocabulary," she said finally. "What vocabulary?" She pointed to the clause in my offer letter that I'd glossed over when I was excited about the new opportunity. This language about employment contingent upon role approval and business necessity. This was written to protect them from reliance claims. Reliance claims? If you resigned from your previous job based on their offer, and they hired you under false pretenses, you have a legal claim for damages. But this clause is supposed to give them an escape hatch. She looked at me over her coffee. "Except it's not airtight, especially if you can prove the hire was never properly authorized to begin with." I felt something shift in my chest, the same feeling I used to get when a supply chain problem suddenly made sense after days of looking at confusing data. "So what do I do?" Rebecca leaned back in her chair. You stop thinking like an employee who got fired and start thinking like a whistleblower who discovered fraud. She showed me the text message again. This is witness intimidation. Mild, but still intimidation. And this? She pointed to the bounce-back emails. This is destruction of evidence. Evidence of what? Someone created unauthorized headcount, spent company money on false hires, and then tried to cover it up when they got caught. In a publicly traded company, that's securities fraud if it affects financial reporting. My hands felt steady for the first time all day. What's my next move? You write one email. Professional, factual, no emotion. You ask for specific records and you tell them to preserve everything. What records? All of them. Role authorization, budget approval, hiring authority, termination authority, communication logs. And you include that magic phrase, please preserve all records related to this matter pending investigation. Investigation by who? Rebecca smiled like a sniper who'd just acquired target lock. That's what they'll be wondering when they read it. So I went home and wrote the email like I was filing an incident report. Timeline documented, questions itemized, evidence attached. No accusations, no threats, just a systematic request for information that any legitimate organization should be able to provide without breaking a sweat. Who authorized the job requisition? Who authorized the offer letter? Who authorized my termination? Why was my hiring manager's email invalid? Why was I instructed not to contact company personnel? Then I added the line Rebecca had coached me on. Please preserve all records, communications, and documentation related to this hiring and termination decision, including approval routing and messaging logs, pending review. I sent it to HR, to Michelle Parker's email address, and to the legal department's general intake. Then I copied my personal attorney, whose name I included in the CC line where everyone could see it. Within 2 hours, my phone rang. Company main line. Mr. Sullivan? This is Lisa Rodriguez from Employee Relations. I understand there was some confusion regarding your start date. Confusion. Like I'd gotten lost in the parking garage instead of systematically terminated by people who didn't know my name. Ma'am, it wasn't confusion. It was a prepared termination, executed by people who had my termination letter ready before I'd completed 15 minutes of employment. Long pause. We'd like to schedule a call to discuss this matter. I'll be available, I said. Will Michael Brooks be joining the call? Another pause. We'll coordinate appropriate participants, which meant Michael Brooks either didn't exist or was no longer available to coordinate anything. The call was scheduled for early the next morning. Get it done before the workday starts, before I could talk to anyone else who might ask inconvenient questions. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, a cup of coffee, and my notes organized like a briefing packet. Lisa Rodriguez joined first, then Patricia Henderson from HR, then a man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as outside counsel for the company. Outside counsel. They were paying a lawyer by the hour because of what they called confusion. Mr. Sullivan, we regret that your onboarding didn't proceed as planned, Lisa began, using the kind of soft language that's designed to make problems sound smaller than they are. There was an internal organizational adjustment that affected your position. The lawyer leaned forward with the practiced confidence of someone who'd made problems disappear before. We'd like to offer you an enhanced severance package in exchange for a comprehensive release of claims and a confidentiality agreement. Enhanced severance for a job I held for 14 minutes? I asked. That's an interesting business model. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. Goodwill doesn't usually require outside counsel and confidentiality agreements. Lisa jumped in quickly. We're not trying to be adversarial, Mr. Sullivan. Then answer my questions. Who authorized Michael Brooks to hire me? Who authorized my termination? Where is Michael Brooks now? That information involves internal personnel matters. Then I'm not signing anything. The lawyer's tone shifted, cooler and more direct. Mr. Sullivan, if you choose to pursue this matter further, you'll be spending considerable time and money on legal fees, and frankly, it might affect your reputation in the industry. There it was. Not quite a threat, but close enough to make his intention clear. Please repeat that, I said, my voice carrying the kind of authority I'd learned from 8 years of dealing with officers who thought their rank made them smarter than the people doing the actual work. He backtracked quickly. I'm simply explaining the practical realities of litigation. No, you're suggesting professional consequences if I don't cooperate. That's witness intimidation. They offered more money, extended benefits, a mutual non-disparagement clause that would prevent either side from discussing the matter publicly. But they wouldn't answer a single question about who made the decisions or why. If you want my signature, I said, I need 3 things. A reference letter from senior leadership stating this separation was not performance-related. Written confirmation that this termination was due to internal authorization failures, not my conduct. And answers to my questions about who authorized what. We don't typically provide that level of detail, the lawyer said. Then you don't typically fire people before learning their names. I ended the call and immediately sent a recap email documenting every statement, every offer, every refusal to provide information. Just the facts. No editorializing. That same day, I filed a formal complaint with the state labor agency. Not a social media rant or an angry letter to the CEO. A structured complaint with documentation, timeline evidence, and a clear description of what appeared to be systematic fraud in the hiring process. The complaint created something they couldn't make disappear with a phone call. A case number. An official investigation. A paper trail that would follow them whether I signed their agreement or not. 2 days later, Lisa called back. Her voice was different this time, less scripted and more urgent. Mr. Sullivan, we'd like to arrange an in-person meeting with Michelle Parker, our interim VP of operations. Interim VP. So my complaint had finally reached the person whose signature was on my offer letter. The meeting was scheduled for late afternoon in a corner conference room with real windows and a view of the city skyline. Michelle Parker was already seated when I arrived. A woman in her mid-50s with the kind of direct bearing that comes from years of making decisions other people have to live with. She stood up, shook my hand firmly, and said my name correctly on the first try. Mr. Sullivan, I've read your documentation and your complaint filing. I'm sorry this happened, and I'm going to be completely direct with you. She slid a new packet across the table. Your hire should never have occurred. I waited for her to continue. The requisition for your role was created by Nicholas Coleman and routed under an unauthorized project code. It bypassed normal budget approval controls and used temporary funding that was allocated for consultant services, not permanent hires. So my instincts had been right. The job was never real. Michael Brooks approved the hire without proper authority. When our finance team flagged the discrepancy during month-end reconciliation, legal instructed HR to terminate immediately to prevent continued unauthorized expenditure. Where is Michael Brooks now? Michael's employment was terminated yesterday, following our internal investigation. I let that information settle, so he was fired for hiring me. He was terminated for creating unauthorized headcount, using falsified budget approvals. Your hire was part of a pattern of misconduct that included at least 3 other similar incidents over the past 6 months. Michelle leaned forward. I'm going to tell you something that's not in any report. Michael was attempting to build a team that would report directly to him, circumventing normal organizational structure. He was essentially creating his own department without authorization, using temporary project funds to avoid budget oversight. And I was evidence of that scheme. You were the evidence that finally got someone's attention. When you filed your complaint and demanded preservation of records, our legal team had to conduct a full review. What they found was systematic abuse of the hiring system. She opened the new packet. This is our resolution offer. It includes financial compensation equivalent to 6 months of the salary in your original offer, health insurance continuation, reimbursement for documented job search expenses, and a reference letter signed by me stating your separation was due to internal control failures, not performance issues. I reviewed the documents carefully. The money was substantial. The reference letter was exactly what I'd asked for, and the language clearly stated that my termination resulted from internal authorization irregularities discovered during routine compliance review. I want one addition, I said. Written confirmation that I resigned from my previous position in good faith reliance on your offer, and that this situation resulted from unauthorized hiring practices, not any action on my part. Michelle nodded. Done. A week later, after my attorney reviewed the final agreement, I signed. The state complaint was withdrawn as part of the resolution. 3 months later, I started at a competitor with a better title and a 15% salary increase. On my first day, my new manager greeted me personally, walked me to my desk, and introduced me to my team. When I logged into my email, there was a welcome message waiting. George, glad you're finally here. We've been looking forward to working with you. I kept those screenshots from my 14-minute career saved in a folder I opened only once more, the day I got my settlement check. Not because I wanted to relive the humiliation, but because I wanted to remember the lesson. Some companies don't fire you because you fail. They fire you because you're proof of their failure. The difference between surviving that kind of situation and being destroyed by it comes down to one thing: refusing to let them convince you that their corruption is your problem. Documentation, persistence, and the willingness to ask uncomfortable questions can turn a 14-minute firing into a 6-figure education in corporate accountability. Michael Brooks learned that lesson too, though from the other side. Last I heard, he was working retail. Here's what I learned that day. They didn't fire me because I wasn't good enough. They fired me because I was proof they weren't good enough. And sometimes, being the evidence of someone else's failure is the most valuable position you can hold.